Policy and Personnel Committee meeting for May 2025. With me today are my fellow committee members, Ms. Nanette Melkonian, Sandra Alvarez, Dr. Shields, our liaison, and also interim superintendent or acting superintendent, Dr. Feeney from Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment, and Dr. Katie Bear, Schreiber Principal, and of course, wonderful Holly on staff. So, without further ado, because we have a lot to do today, there's a lot of paper to cover.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
So the first item on the agenda is the minutes from our last meeting. They were board approved. Just there as a reference. The next item on the agenda is personnel update. I know that people here in this room know that May 6th was a very nice board meeting where we recognized our retirees. We acknowledged people who were getting tenure this year. It was a very positive and uplifting evening, and very happy for those staff members. Staffing for September is ongoing. We're in the process of hiring, mostly targeted in those areas where we had retirements. So you will see, as trustees, those additions or appointments at upcoming board meetings as we move forward. The next item on the agenda is 1.3. I believe this is a renumbering, Ms. Brooks.
It's a renumbering because we already have a policy 8140. I can't remember what it is, but it's a required policy, and so the prohibition of unmanned aerial vehicle drones is from 2017, and NISBA simply said renumber it to 8245. So that's what we will do. It will fall within the facilities and buildings and grounds category. And do we have to put this on for a first read, or can we just?
I think we can just renumber it because
Great.
we're not altering the policy, which we do actually use every now and then.
Oh, wow.
When students want to fly drones and do video footage over games and events like that.
Okay.
So it is an actively used policy.
That's nice to hear. Given that it's an actively used policy and given that technology is changing so much, do we see a need to review this policy and bring it up more current, or you want to think about it and?
I can think about that. I haven't seen any issues with the policy's enactment so far.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll just ministerially change that number on the table of contents page and the policy.
Yes, 1.4, this Code of Conduct, Culture and Character is coming back to the committee. As you know, it has been here before. Dr. Bear and Dr. Feeney did some work with the committee on the issue within our Character, Culture and Conduct Code with dress code. And since then, we've also had some new legislation passed that has to do with the electronics ban. That was part of the budget approval recently. So we've worked in that language as well, just to try and be efficient with our use of time. And there was a definition within the policy as well that was asked to be reworded. So they have all three of that as an update for you. So thank you for being here.
Correct. So we can start with the definition of discrimination, which used the word discrimination within the definition. So we do have a proposed rewording of that. Discrimination refers to unfair or unequal treatment of a student by other students or staff on school property or at a school function, including but not limited to actions based on a person's actual or perceived identity group. So that language lines up with other aspects of our code and removes the word discrimination from the definition.
Okay, did you mention that, does this align with the definition for harassment? Because I think we're trying to make sure all of our definitions align. I can go back. I can go into the bullying and harassment one. Check. Because I just got this particular piece of paper today.
Harassment and bullying are
Identifying.
together though, is that how the code of conduct is?
Well, in discrimination, harassment and bullying are together. It says bullying, see harassment and bullying. And bullying harassment. So, what I thought, Dr. Schultz, what I thought we were going to do was pick up the definition of discrimination from the NISBA policy on harassment and put that into the code of conduct, code of CCCC, to make those definitions the same.
I believe they actually are. I'm looking at both.
Well, under discrimination on harassment, it says the act of denying.
No, because it's this one.
No, I was talking about the
Oh, discrimination, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was talking about the definition, the new red line definition of
I
discrimination.
thought you went straight to harassment one, so we're back up.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Did I skip a step?
No, I thought you heard you say harassment definition.
That's what I thought I heard too.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
No, what I meant to say if I said that was in the harassment
So
policy.
In the code of conduct, we have not changed discrimination, is what you're saying?
No, we did in code of conduct, not in harassment.
Oh, not in harassment.
There's a red line for here, on this page, somewhere,
It's the new policy 0115.
second page of this.
It's in 115, the regulation, page 2. It's number 3. It's crossed out in red.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, they're different.
They're different. So it's on one of these pages. Here it is, Nan.
It's number 3.
Discrimination.
Yes. So you're saying it didn't get,
Doesn't matter to me
Yes.
which definition we use, but I think the definition should be the same,
I agree.
consistent.
I agree.
So my understanding was the definition of discrimination in the code of CCCC, because it had started to say discrimination is discriminating.
Right,
And we said, let's change that definition and make it the same as a definition that NISBA provided in the student harassment and bullying prevention and intervention policy.
okay, so we missed that step. We just took discrimination out of the definition, as we discussed last time, but we didn't then align it with the other policy.
Right, so, and it doesn't matter to me which definition is used, I leave that
But just be
to
consistent,
administration,
right?
but please be, we're aiming for the consistency, yes.
Okay. Taking a quick glance at it now, do you have a preference on which way we go? Or should we give it some time to take a look at it?
Let's look at it, why don't we compare what we have in our code of character, culture and conduct, look at the NISBA, which we have not really reviewed since we first proposed the revised code at the beginning of the year, and we can see what fits in.
That's
So, just so I have clarity, that we have clarity, it's looking at the harassment, looking at a definition of harassment that we have in the back of the code, definition of discrimination, and making sure those two definitions are aligned with each other, or certainly aligned with the NISBA recommendations, correct?
In the, no, because we're talking about two different policies.
Yes.
Yes.
That's why I
Not-
want clarity, right.
I don't think we have to look at NISBA, you just have to pick between the two policies. Because someone edited it already in the sexual, the student harassment and bullying prevention policy, which is on for today, someone already edited the discrimination policy.
Discrimination
That was the
definition.
attorney.
Definition, yeah, oh, so the
That was the
attorney
attorney.
chose a definition in one policy that we're reviewing today, and then your committee chose a definition for a different policy, so the question is, which policy we're going
Which
for both?
definition?
Which definition?
I'm with
Right,
We're
because
going for
there is
both.
a standalone policy on, even though we weave the harassment, bullying, discrimination within the code of, our
CCC.
student code, there's a separate policy on each of those, so certainly we want those to be aligned.
Yes, actually, it was in the NISBA policy where it said discrimination means
Did they take it?
discrimination.
Oh, okay.
And that's when I
So
went to the
don't look at
attorney.
NISBA, just look at the two
And that's
policies.
when I went to the attorney and I said, we can't have the definition within the thing you're being defined. So
They are
you understand what I'm
closely
saying.
similar, they are just. I don't
Whatever
know
we
what
end
they
up
did.
with,
Yeah.
Is okay,
It
you're not
should
saying
be-
one or the other,
I
you're just
don't
saying,
think-
let's be consistent.
yes, thank you,
Understood.
okay.
I think we have a clear direction. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
So not just harassment or discrimination, but you want all the definitions that will go in student harassment and any policy moving further to align with the code of conduct,
Yes.
culture, and character. Okay.
Or vice versa, just wherever.
Whatever we
Wherever
decide.
we land on the
All the
definition,
definitions.
we should
Okay.
aim to have,
I do have a list of some policies that might intersect, so I can give that to you as well.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
But since the definitions in the code have already been board approved. So,
So if we end up changing those,
or if
then they
we,
will go back to the board to be reapproved in the Code of Conduct, Culture and
maybe
Character.
we can use those to guide those standalone ones.
Correct, correct. It's one or the other. Since the Code of Conduct is being changed anyway, it all would just be incorporated into the revision.
Since Code of CCCC
Yes.
gets reviewed annually.
Yes.
I just think logistics wise, it's probably the best one to be the consistent one, and that is just what everyone looks at each time. I think,
This one gets, the
there you
harassment
go,
one
so
gets
both of
reviewed.
them.
But in the event we decide not to review the harassment one, it's not required by law. The student harassment is not required by law to be reviewed annually. There's a little thing at the end
Saying
of
that,
it,
well,
saying that
half the
review it
policy
in
says we're-
conjunction with the Code of Character, Culture, and Conduct. So, but by law, you're right, the Code of Character, Culture must be annually reviewed. So, whichever one you all decide, whichever definitions you think are best suited,
Okay.
that's what we'll do.
Right, but our committee is not looking at those standalone policies, that's not what we've done. We've looked at the code,
Yes.
which incorporates those definitions, so the committee is looking at the standalone ones.
So you and I will meet and discuss how to make sure they're in alignment.
Okay.
Right, we will look at the standalone ones. We're just asking you to choose the version of the definitions
Right.
that you prefer in the Code of Conduct, since that really is the one that really governs. I mean, both of these govern, but the Code of Conduct, they're both universal, but we specifically refer to the Code of Conduct as a district. So personally, I'm happy with you going through just looking at the definitions in the student harassment and bullying policy and saying, yeah, I think this is the definition that should be in the Code of Conduct, or no, we like the definition in the Code of Conduct, and that should be in the student harassment. So
Okay.
my ask is to leave it to you all who have the training, the nuance for these definitions, and make a recommendation to us as to which ones prevail. And then we'll put them in the right places.
Thank you very much, yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay with the committee? I'm sure you have more.
Do you want to now go into the dress
Sure.
code and the device?
Yeah, let's start with the dress code. We made some proposed modifications. I don't know if people have the track changes up. There was some question about sort of the language in that opening paragraph. I know there had been discussion of reworking the paragraph. One of the members, we did not hear any of that, so we did discuss that with the committee. Reworked a few sections. I'll wait until everyone gets a chance to look at that. So for that opening paragraph, you can see the edits that we made. One of the concerns that were discussed, there were three concerns discussed when we talked about the dress code last time. This notion of how to address dress code violations, this notion of privacy and dignity. So we worked with that language in both the opening as well as the beginning. There was also, and you see what was deleted in that opening paragraph, concerns regarding dress code compliance will always be addressed privately to avoid public embarrassment or shaming. Just to a more simplified point, dress code concerns will be addressed with discretion, dignity, and respect, which really, those are the themes of the entire code of character, culture, and conduct. question of the notion of what constitutes a top and bottom, is a dress. So we tried to clarify that. Yes, a one-piece outfit would be perfectly fine, whether it's a dress or jumper or whatever you might wear as a one-piece. We put that in. There was, I'm going to hop back in a moment, but I do want to jump ahead. There was a discussion, the importance of communicating that building district, the building administrator, the principal primarily, or another district administrator, ultimately they're the ones that use district guidelines to determine if something is offensive. We were pretty clear in most things, but this notion of what is offensive, rather than get into the weeds and define everything that might be offensive and knowing that we will miss something, just a reminder that the building principal, the district administrator, does have the authority to determine, following our district guidelines, what is offensive. We had a repetition in that enforcement regarding the concerns about the dress code compliance, and altered the language there. The other piece of the dress code that received a lot of discussion by far was related to the wearing of hats, which I think very fairly was brought up as a point of inconsistency in terms of our elementary schools. Some allow hats, some don't. Our middle school is very much a hats are not permitted, and our high school is indifferent. If you want to wear a hat, you can wear a hat. Certainly some protocols regarding how much is covered, so on and so forth. There was a desire to have more consistency across the elementary schools, and given the middle school position of no hats, which the middle school faculty feel very strongly about, the building principal feels very strongly about, the only thing that seems to, would have seemed to make sense was, okay, so if it's no hats in the middle school, we really should mirror that in the elementary buildings and make no hats at the elementary building. So they go from no hats, and then as they get older, there are hats. That was discussed, and even there, the feeling was that some of the elementary school buildings that would create unnecessary tension, anxiety. There are some, when you go to the elementaries, you don't see a lot of hats, but some kids will wear hats, and sometimes there are medical reasons why we wear them, which would always be permitted in the code no matter what, but other times there are temporary personal reasons for X, Y, Z. So the principals and faculty members and even the counselors of those schools that were a little more permissive regarding hats were deeply concerned about a switch to no hats for a couple of reasons. A, it's creating an issue out of something that is really not an issue at the elementary level. And for those students who no longer were able to wear hats, if they did allow them for a medical reason, it makes them stand out a little more. Hours and hours, surveys taken, Zoom meetings, in-person meetings. At the end of the day, I think we are actually removing hats. We are proposing to remove hats altogether from the code and leave it as the status quo. So they would certainly be permitted at the high school. At the middle school, they would remain not permitted, and the elementaries would have their own policies.
For me,
Yes.
the idea of a code of conduct and language with clear-cut guidelines for families and students to review. One of the biggest things that I've seen on a positive that the district has gone through is really think of the students in mind with respect for the requests of the administration and the teachers and faculty, but really be student-focused and not so disciplinary in its feel of the document, but rules need to be in place, and hence why a document exists, right? So the only, it's not a pro-Washington thing, this is a national thing, that a lot of code of conducts are seen as ambiguous and cause a lot of ill sentiments with certain groups, that it's not clear-cut, and things occur where it might be seen as targeting or discrimination. So when there's no clear-cut policy and information, that's when those kind of sentiments occur. For me, instead of addressing it in the code of conduct, we're doing the opposite. We're removing it for the potential of those issues to arise. I understand it. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm disappointed that there's nothing, that instead of addressing it in the dress code, that it's just entirely removed. I would say that on the word offensive, I have a similar sentiment. So the sentence that was used with the ultimately building and district administrators will be the deciding factor, instead of just kind of giving more information on it. That one I'm not as disappointed with because of the nature of the word and how broad, but for something that is clearly a discrepancy between buildings with no clear distinction of age as a reference, because we have the older and the younger, so that for me, it's just, I disagree. And I'm not looking for it to be changed. You have a committee for a reason. I respect the committee. I will take it, but I still have to voice my opinion on it, and disappointment of like the lack of addressing it within the policy, and because now now it doesn't exist, right? So now it's not a policy.
Right.
So now it's for me, if I had a student in Weber who wore a hat and got told that they need to remove it, and that student refused because they chose to read the handbook, and they said, it's not in the handbook, there's nothing. It's above my ears, because this still states the ears. So I would think that student would then have some sort of consequence for the refusal. And then for me, where would that administrator or staff member or faculty have any justification to perform some sort of consequence when it's not listed?
We do have information in our school handbook, so
Individual school handbook.
individual
Okay.
school handbooks. So while that is not directly policy, it's an interpretation of what aligns with district board policy, so the information would be available to students.
Let me just add that what you described, this desire for consistency, that was a guiding aspect of our discussions regarding hats. And the desire to have something consistent across the elementary schools. And quite frankly, recognition, even the committee, everyone says, well, if the board is asking for this, we know it's a board policy. If they are demanding, we'll do what the board asks.
Not demand, and also one committee
Right.
member,
But
so I think
I'm
it
just
should go to
sharing,
full board.
I just want to
Yes.
share the committee's view,
Yeah.
right? So the committee struggled with this issue more than probably any other issue related to the code. And even when it looked like we had a consensus that the elementaries would say, fine, no hats, there was really some very strong pushback, which kind of surprised us. So we could certainly put in, the code, what we had before regarding permissible at the high school, not allowed at the middle school, and we could say up to the elementary school, and recognizing there are different cultures in place at each of those elementary schools. I have talked about consistency and the value of it, but there are different cultures there at each of the 5 elementaries. So certainly we could put that, so at least there is greater guidance.
And developmentally, when you're in elementary school, typically your parents are helping you dress. So you see fewer students who are just coming in with hats. Middle school, you start to have more of the parties and things and wearing specific hats that indicate that you went to a social gathering. So that gives some of the issues and why it would be different at the middle school. And you guys know I'm standing out in front of the building most days of the week. I can tell you I maybe one student a day wearing a hat. So they're kind of over that, the novelty of, we get to wear a hat now. It's just not an issue at the high school. It's less of an issue at the elementary school. Where they see more of the problems is at that middle school level.
And a lot of the principals, I'm sorry, actually argued highlighting it in this way will actually make it more of an issue at the elementary school, for what that's worth.
So I don't have the previous version of the dress code with me. In the previous version, there was language regarding the hats, right? Which we don't see here, it's been completely removed.
Right.
Rather than redlined. So,
No, right, yeah, but you see it on the right-hand side, deleted.
yes.
That's what was deleted.
Oh, thank you.
Caps are, yeah, I wouldn't do it without
Thank you, okay,
being clear.
yep. Now I see it, okay, it wasn't as, I wasn't paying attention
Sorry.
to the
Very
little
tiny
comments. Thank you,
Yeah,
no, thank you for pointing that out. So what I was going to suggest, instead of a vacuum about hats, is there a way to say, either drop a footnote or a bullet regarding head coverings, or please see individual school handbooks, or something to guide,
On
something so it's
guidance.
not in a vacuum. Excuse me, since most people are responsible for looking at the code of conduct annually, and uses the guiding principle as opposed to maybe individual school handbooks, although of course parents should be paying attention to those as well. But maybe add someplace in here, it doesn't matter to me if it's a footnote, a bullet, please refer to your school's student handbook or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
For information regarding head
Yeah.
coverings,
So
or hats, or,
there's a committee for a reason, and I truly respect everything that was discussed, and I appreciate that you even brought it back to the committee. So if the feedback from the committee is that they were happy with the original wording, fine. But if this happy medium of it was removed entirely and there is a footnote stating to refer to the handbook, I think that
I like
is
that.
consistent,
I appreciate
right?
that, yeah.
Because once you said it, it's, there you go, right? There is a handbook, there is something that states it somewhere,
No, I think that's a good solution.
which also for,
Put it in.
there was something
Put a
else
bullet right there.
that was different.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make it a footnote, I'll put it right in there. Yeah,
Yeah, but there's a natural place where to put it,
Yeah,
in that
so
section.
it gives notice, and
because had hats and caps not even be listed in the original document, it would have never been discussed, right? It was very bizarre that it is a standalone item right there, very prominent, versus.
Poof, it's gone.
Sorry.
That's what we do.
I have a list of things you could take care of with your poof, it's gone.
Right?
I won't say what it is. Okay.
Doesn't work on people, I'm just saying.
Hey, no, I'm kidding.
All righty,
Never you.
is there more?
Okay, so we okay with those updates to the code?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
so this is great, we'll make those updates, that means we get to come back, right? This is gonna be awesome. And to another.
Does it need to come back?
We may not need them to come back.
Oh,
But
okay.
we'll go on to the device
Yes,
ban
now we've got
section.
the
please.
device, yeah, absolutely.
We'll see
Yeah.
it here, but we won't necessarily need to.
Fair enough.
So looking at
Unless you
the,
want to. You're always invited.
Thank you.
how much I love policy. So the next matter that we looked into was the internet-based devices coming from the governor, and really looking to distinguish between a personal internet-based device versus a school-issued device. So at many of the grade levels, we're talking about a Chromebook. For some of our littles or some of our perhaps special ed students, they could be looking at an iPad. So we tried to keep that really clear. So we started with our electronics use policy that existed within the code. If you look at that first paragraph, it's largely the same. We did add in to the end of the very first sentence in accordance with New York State Education Law 2803. So it shows it's not just a committee or the Board of Ed or the school district making this change, we're working in accordance with the law. We added a definition of devices, so for the purposes of this policy, we used the language from that legislation to ensure that we were being consistent. And should there be, a modification to that, as all of the school districts are now living this, that could be something recommended for an update for review the following year. So non-internet enabled devices, I am ready to buy some stock in phones that are the old flip phones that don't have any internet capabilities. Largely what we're seeing is even if it looks like one of those old phones, there is some level of internet. And just because it's not an internet enabled device doesn't mean it bans texting. So we're not changing all of the behaviors, we're just making sure that we're very clear. Now, looking at the scope of the school day, we talked about that bell to bell, as the governor has stated, is the beginning of the day to the end of the day, not a single period class. So at the high school, for example, that would be 8:05 to 3:05. And speaking with Miss Javelin, she would be doing the same for her hours, which are 8:07 to 3:10, right?
Sure.
So that's the time frame we'd be looking at. So when I have kids getting off of school buses at 7:12, we're not starting to monitor that device usage until our 8:05 bell rings. The elementaries in practice, on the other hand, have had it as soon as the student gets dropped off to from when they're picked up to go home. And that could be bus, parent, whatever the case may be, that's already been in practice for them, and that is really how they consider their school day for the elementary students. Looking at storage during school hours, in the original policy that we had recommended to the board, we did have a separate standalone sentence referring to high school students may have the device on their person, but it needs to be used in accordance with, instructional practices and at the direction of their teacher. We did remove that because now we're saying that the devices need to be away. So we're talking about having them in backpacks or lockers. And that would also include elementaries. Yes, they have cubbies, but it wouldn't just be out in their cubby, it would stay in their backpacks. Talking about permitted use, when you look through the legislation, there's a number of exceptions that are specifically listed. So we tried to encapsulate that into 2 separate points instead of listing each one separately. And instead of, thinking about what the culture has been, particularly at the high school, if a student has a MacBook or an iPad or some other device that they're using, instead of making that at the discretion of each individual teacher, we're really looking for consistency here. So if there is a specific educational purpose that a student needs a particular program, and we're thinking for research or a big program like SPSS that they're perhaps analyzing data in another class, then we're really looking at what is that purpose, and it's going through the building principal or designee, which would be an assistant principal, instead of leaving it up to individual teachers throughout the building. They also specifically outline translation, so we are looking at what are the options that we have to provide the translation services for students during the school day that wouldn't necessitate having a device, because it's just introducing another exception where students have access and phones out. And yes, I'm primarily thinking of phones for this particular circumstance. And obviously if there's an emergency. So if there's something that a student really needs to contact home, get a phone number for a doctor out of their phone, they can still come to one of our offices and make that phone call, make that connection. But should they need their device, because no one knows phone numbers anymore, we'd be able to navigate that instead of just having, someone says, oh, I have an emergency, and can be texting and doing things throughout the day. The next would certainly be for medical needs. There are certain conditions that a student may have that they need to actually have their phone on them because it's monitoring perhaps blood sugar levels and will indicate to them if there's a spike or a sharp drop that they need to go and get some medical assistance for whatever the case may be. And there is another provision in there for legal accommodations, which would include an IEP or a 504. I can think of a handful of our students who do have their non-district issue Chromebook device as part of an IEP. So when it is really required for something that would be an IEP or a 504, that would be specifically outlined. So we're trying to make sure that it is as equitable as possible within both the legislation and meeting the needs of our students without turning into something that we can't really monitor and control at the school. So if you have a policy and we can't enforce it, there's nothing much that we can do, it just turned into words on a page. The prohibited conduct has not changed. We're talking about using your device appropriately, whether it is a district-owned device or not, and that prohibited content applications or platforms, whether you are on your own device or a district Chromebook, we still do not want you accessing inappropriate or illegal digital content, gambling, or being on inappropriate sites or using applications that are not instructionally based. What else is new is the enforcement that you see at the bottom. So again, this will mostly be applicable at the high school because it is such a shift for us as opposed to elementaries are not allowing these devices. Middle school does not allow these devices. They already have it in place. So really looking at tiered consequences for repeated violations that will be crystal clear, and in our handbook, it doesn't need to be in the policy, that will be crystal clear to our students and to our families of what happens if you are not following this policy, the high school guidelines. What are the consequences, and understanding that the legislation specifically restricts our ability to actually suspend a student for this type of infraction, this violation of the code of conduct. So looking at how can we make sure our students are in class and successful while also following ed law.
So this is gonna be a really big culture shift for the
Yes.
students at the high school.
Across New York.
Across New York and wherever else this has been implemented. And so my first concern, obviously we need to follow the law. My first concern is how are we going to educate the students? Because it's almost as though they need to be taught in a class what the law is and how we have to because it's such a major shift for them. The compulsion to go to your locker to check your email or your text is going to be great. And I don't want kids, because I don't want them to be inadvertently penalized for doing something that's become so ingrained and so habitual. And I'm not, it's not like smoking, it's different. It has been an accepted part of daily life, routine. And you even talked about going to the office and having somebody call the doctor. You know, we've taught little kids, you can take out your cell phone and call your doctor, and so there are a lot of behaviors that are going to have to be changed. So I'm just putting out there, while we're trying to comply with the law, we are fair to the kids somehow, and don't just put it in the handbook, but really try to highlight for the parents and the kids that there's a major change. This is established by law. We have to do this. Please don't make us come after you. Like, please learn to adjust your behavior.
So one of our concerns is that, you know, students will spend more time in the bathrooms, because if you are in there in perhaps a stall on your phone, nobody can see you, nobody can find you. So there are some unintended consequences as we shift this culture that will take a while, particularly for our rising seniors who have had 3 years of unrestricted phone use. When I say that, I don't mean that teachers aren't having them put their phones in phone jails, and during class and during tests they're not able to access their phones. I say that the teachers don't call them phone jails, they just say in the phone cubbies, the shoe tree. I say phone jails. So it's not that they have never had to give up their phone, but it's very different to say for an hour, this is what we need to do. We have, to use Dr. Feeney's phrase, pockets of excellence that are happening already in our schools. So in PE class, you cannot have your phone, and the students are actively participating in their PE class without their phone. That already happens. In our health classes, it's not negotiable. They walk in, they put their phone in the little phone jail, and then for the entire hour, they're not able to access their phone, including when they get out of the room and use the restroom, go someplace else. So these things are already happening in some places, and I can list other teachers who are doing the same. It's not just that department, but those are examples where every single teacher in both of those departments, it's not negotiable. You do not have your phone, and they work around it. So it's possible to do that. I did speak with faculty members about this on Wednesday at our staff development meeting, because I said, this is coming. We need a policy by August 1st. That's the responsibility of the Board of Education, but our role is to implement this. I need feedback based on really what we're laying out as guidelines at the high school level to say, will this work? How can we help our students to be successful? As the high school, because this is such a big shift, that first tiered consequence is a warning. So it's not that the first time you have your phone out, we're throwing it and you never get it back again and we keep it forever. The first is a warning. You cannot have your phone, I'm saying phone, but it could be a number of other devices, could be an Apple Watch, could be the glasses, could be anything. You cannot have this device. I need you to put it away right now. This is your only warning the next time it goes to your assistant principal. And going through those tiered consequences, the next time it would be referred to the assistant principal, leaving that device in the assistant principal's office for the remainder of the day. The next time it happens, same thing, goes to the assistant principal's office, the device remains there, and then a parent or guardian would need to come and pick it up at some point during school hours. So really trying to figure out how we can show the behavior continued is not okay, and it will continue to get a little bit more. And you notice that I'm not saying we're taking students out of class to do this. We're taking the device away so that they can more successfully contribute in a classroom setting. So the middle school already having this rule, they go to the assistant principal's office with the device right away. It's not as much of an issue, so they don't need the warning the way that we do. We do not want to turn into the cell phone police because that takes away from what we can do with students and our relationship with students in other ways. However, having everything structured so clearly will give that guidance. My hope is that we do have enough time with the school year that we can do, whether it's, some group assemblies, which are not my favorite. I think we have some kids on devices in the back that will not hear words. So trying to get into classrooms, making sure that students know what's coming, why it's coming, and how we hope to help. Our compact committee has been discussing this for the entire year. So I already have all of those stakeholder groups represented who could potentially help us get this word out. I really, really, really want to do a town hall with families so that they hear what's going on. They can see what we expect to do for the next year. And a student could also come with their family to just talk it out. Well, it's not that I disagree with banning internet-based devices for instruction. It's not an option for us right now. If this is going into ed law, we need to comply with it. So how can we partner and find the best ways to do that? And some of that will be, if you need to contact your child, we need you to call your assistant principal's office because we can't just have you text them throughout the day.
Clearly, you're proactive.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah, I'll also share with you that I was at a recent meeting with the superintendents, and this is something that we're all having to deal with across the state. So we're having conversations about, and we've talked about this, is like, many high schools have an open campus.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that impact the implementation of this? And the consensus in the group that I was with was, look, this is a bell-to-bell ban on campus. We're not looking to enforce what happens when our seniors and juniors go off campus. That's their time away from campus. Some high schools are completely open. So we're aware of what some of the nuances are for our school and where we have the ability to influence this law and where our influence stops. So.
And the PWTA really wants to be involved in this implementation, which I think is very positive because then they can tell us what is working in the classroom, what's not working in the classroom, and we can come up with the best solutions together.
Okay, so I have some questions. Can I do one, please? Scope of the school day, I understand it's bell to bell, not necessarily when the kids get off the bus and they're sitting around for an hour. What about, and so that does not include extracurriculars, so in the afternoon, school bell rings, they're at sports practice, theater, chess club, whatever.
That's not what we're talking about. 8:05 to 3:05 for the high school.
Field trips.
That's a conversation that we had. At this point, we had been talking about not restricting access to having their phone on field trips because there might be a point in time where the bus is running a little bit late. I'm letting my parent know. However, we'd be looking to say, make sure your phone is away and that we're not collecting phones during the field trip.
Okay.
And there are overnight trips.
And so I was thinking both.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes,
We're certainly
overnight
not,
and
we're
out of
certainly
the
not
country.
gonna go into that world.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it really truly is school building and not school grounds.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. The storage during school hours, students must store their electronic devices in backpacks or lockers. That is going to be classroom dependent, building dependent?
So currently, at the middle school, they're kept in their lockers. They're not supposed to be on them during the day. At the elementary level, we don't have lockers necessarily. We
They're
have
backpacks.
cubbies. So the thinking was to don't let them be in view. That if there's any devices that fall into these definitions, they should be away in backpacks.
So is there a way to say students must secure their electronic devices pursuant to the school or classroom policy? Because backpacks or lockers is not a cubby. Like, I don't know if it
In the
needs to be
cubby,
that
it would be
granular.
in the backpack. So we did speak with the elementary principals, it wouldn't be out in a cubby, it's in their backpack, and the backpack is in the cubby.
Can we say in accordance with the respective school practice, or would that help clarify? Or is it not necessary?
Just to feed off of that, it's just a question of where is the footnote going about the handbook? Each individual school's handbook.
Yeah, we won't make that actually a footnote, it'll be right in the body, so it'll be a bullet in the body of the text.
So that's gonna be in the dress code. So
Yes.
my request was gonna be in for the same bullet to be in the enforcement, which sounds like you are asking about that in the same spot.
I was getting
Yeah.
there. Notice in
Um,
my book.
So I think it's for both, I'm just wondering logistically for this document, because like, what is it gonna be, asterisk, check your your individual building handbook. Some way for it to be said, but I have the same sentiment that like, I'm okay with the language as is of those two, comma, refer to individual building handbook.
Yes.
For any part of this code of conduct where there is a difference between
School-specific, yeah.
schools, that should just be referenced. Because for me, if I read it, okay, as a high school student, so if they're walking, it's in the backpack, that's allowed,
True.
right? In Weber, in my backpack, it's allowed, walking around.
But
They
students
don't carry their
backpacks.
backpacks, their backpacks are in their lockers.
So moot point. But
If that were to change,
yeah, and then I guess even with elementary, you're not carrying your backpack around either.
So the only place is the high school.
Yeah. I'm okay with the language, so
And
there's
it-
really no.
So we had the language reviewed by a representative from all three levels.
You're okay with which language, I'm so sorry?
The backpacks.
The storage.
Because you were talking about the storage,
The one that's in here that says students must secure their electronic devices in backpacks
Unless
or
you want
lockers
footnote.
unless otherwise instructed?
yeah, because
Because
there's
they
no
could,
difference between the buildings
Yeah.
technically then.
they could be instructed by the buildings, or the teachers' preferences, maybe they have a special room or something, I don't.
Okay, so then the bigger question is, will it be anywhere else but a backpack or a locker?
Sounds like no.
Don't the,
or the.
yeah, because
cubby.
prior, the teachers
Right.
did the
cubby.
individual teachers did the jail. But now that won't even be an option. It shouldn't even get to the classroom, right? Like,
Right.
that's.
Shouldn't be out in the classroom.
It shouldn't be out, it could be in the
No
classroom.
teacher should actually be collecting them.
They shouldn't.
If somebody has their phone out,
They'll collect it at that point, but they're not stopping everyone at the door
Right.
technically
Because
to
it's
collect.
bell to bell, right.
that is our thinking right now, so when I
could
brought
be
it back to my faculty and I asked them to speak with their chair people, who I already prepped the chair people to say, please speak with your departments and the building reps, because there are a couple things that we were talking about. One recommendation that I heard was the device stays in the backpack, and the backpacks, instead of just sitting, for high school, just sitting next to your chair, are in the back of the room, side of the room, so you lose that need to reach down and try to look at your phone. The other thing that someone said was, well, it could still go in phone jail, my word again, instead of having it in their backpack, because that removes the ability to put it in your pocket, take it with you and go to the restroom. If it's in phone jail and you can't take it with you, the issue with that is you've now introduced the device being out. Oh, well, I need to put it in phone jail. Let me just do a couple things, put it in phone jail. And then when you're taking it out, you now have it out as you're walking into the hallway. So that is our concern with doing something about, collecting it all together at the beginning of every class. And then I've heard other people say, just tell the high school kids to keep it in their locker. Couple things with that, we actually don't have enough lockers for every single high school student to have their own individual locker. So some kids would need to share. And to be honest with you, high school kids are really not using their lockers. So that's why we didn't have a big push to say, let's get more lockers so that all kids can have one. We don't need the expense when they're not using it. So I would be hesitant to say it has to be in their physical lockers. You think about how big the high school is, and if your locker is over here and your last class is over here, now you're sprinting across the building to try to get that before you're going home for the day or whatever your next transition is. So we're trying to find the best way to implement this, knowing that we are not going to have a perfect solution. We are taking an issue that has been this big and turning it into an issue that has been this big. That's been the consistent message I've heard from other New York districts who did implement this on their own 3-4 years ago, saying, here are some of the things that we still deal with. We still have teenagers who want to use their phones, so we just address that specifically when it comes up.
In the next paragraph, student, under permitted use, students may use district-issued devices during class. Isn't it students must?
No,
It's may.
because must means every single time you have class, you have to be using that device. You have permission to when directed by the teacher.
Okay, okay. I guess there's no way of getting around the, we talk about stigma. There's no way of getting around the child who is allowed to use a laptop or an internet-connected device in class because they have an IEP. This law has unintended negative consequences of now highlighting, so students are not gonna say, oh, that child is now able to use this, that child must have an IEP. I'm just putting it out
Yes.
there, I know what the
So-
law is.
But the laptop's no longer an issue. We're a one-to-one district, right? So everyone has a laptop. They'll all be able to use the district-issued device.
And now that we're doing touchscreen Chromebooks as well,
Right.
that is helpful.
So what people will try to carve out, quite frankly, through the CSE is not so much a laptop, whatever, but more so a phone, and I specifically need my phone. There will be some, medical, if you're diabetic and you've got your monitoring device through your phone, or a separate one, certainly, that would be appropriate. Others may find other reasons why somebody would need to carry their own personal cell phone for some medical reason.
And this is why we really tried to distinguish who is approving a use of a different device so that it just didn't turn into you have the nice person who doesn't want to stand up to you using it, and you have the meanie pants who's not going to let you use it. So by having the administration approval, it just raises the level of why do you actually need a non-district issued device. And the state will be collecting demographic information based on who is receiving consequences for this violation and using their devices. And if there's a disparity in race or ethnicity who is getting in trouble, they want a plan to remediate it. One of my challenges is if you have a MacBook and you can text all your friends because you can afford it versus someone who doesn't and now wants the phone out so they can text their friends as well, that turns into a socioeconomic issue. And then when you start breaking down the demographics, who are we unintentionally targeting as you don't have access to this? So that's where the equity comes in that I'm absolutely trying my best to make sure. We do have other ways around it. Students already know they can open a Google Doc, share it with a friend, and they can type back and forth. So we're not solving all of the issues.
See, now I never thought about that.
But
Oh, they
it's-
do.
But it's
It's different.
but this is an important piece, and this is part of what we looked at and struggled with, that fairly or unfairly, we are a one-to-one district. Every student gets a Chromebook, right, grades 2 through 12. If you walk the halls of the high school, you're not going to see a lot of high school students using those Chromebooks for X, Y, Z reasons. So that perhaps speaks to our need to perhaps rethink, and it's not that they don't want a device, but they will bring in their own personal device, which 9 times out of 10, not all the time, would be something like a MacBook. So in order to not have, okay, well, the people with the MacBook, the people with the Chromebooks, nobody has a device. There really is no need, and there's the things that the school, by and large, is demanding of students can be done with a Chromebook. It may be easier or nicer to do on your own personal MacBook, but you can do them on the Chromebook. So that's the tool we've decided will be permitted.
And this will need a tremendous amount of support.
Right, and what compelling reason would be that, no, I need my MacBook because I can't use my Chromebook, that makes the difference. There's some areas where, but in our photography studio, we have Macs that can handle the photo editing that is, one of the fortes of, and there some other areas where we have, Windows-based machines for programming that you might not do on the Chromebook. But by and large, our district-issued devices, that's what students will be permitted to use.
I have a question about the medical piece for a second. Do we already, or will we be informing our teachers of what students have medical needs
Sure.
for these devices?
Absolutely, the same way we do with any sort of medical accommodation we provide.
And it would be the same with an IEP 504.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
information is provided to all instructional staff relating to their students.
So I guess a doctor's note is necessary then?
Depending on if it's through the CSC, that would go through the CSC. The medical thing, we haven't received a lot of guidance regarding the medical. There's some, once again, that's a no-brainer, but that might be for a phone for a monitoring device if you're looking at your sugar levels, whatever it might be.
And those students would be
But-
known to the nurse.
Right, the known ahead of time, but what the compelling reason would be that, oh, I need my personal MacBook, I can't use the Chromebook, that we're curious to see.
This will evolve.
Yes, of course,
And
it's
we will see.
Annual.
Yeah, I think it will. I think it's something we're going to have to keep coming back to see how's it going and evaluate that.
in the enforcement part, did we already talk about putting in either a footnote or a please reference your school's handbook, where it says each school implement a tier consequence structure for repeated violations? Can we say, please refer to whatever, so that both the student and the parent know where to find this tiered consequence structure?
I can
Unless
do
it's in the
that.
code of conduct somewhere else under the violations, but someplace where they know to go to find out exactly, what's gonna happen to me if. Wow, thank you.
I do think that we are far ahead of where other districts are. This policy, these guidelines were issued very late, clearly, with the language. So the fact that we are at a board policy committee talking about this potential revision, it's pretty good. It does need to be in place clearly for August, but we're in good shape in terms of at least looking at it.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if state ed issues regulations. Because usually when there's a law
Right,
from the legislature,
they also issue the
there's
regulations.
an agency that issues regulations. It'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
if they can, what they do, how this changes.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, right? On July 25th.
Well, we're glad for the opportunity to bring it to you today, because we took a look at how many board meetings we have between now and
Yeah.
August 1st, and we think we're in a good place for having the policy ready to go.
Okay, thank you. So if you like the general overview of this, I would like to start speaking with our students, with our families, and scheduling a town hall so we can really get the information out there.
First read.
We're committee, so we still have to go to the full board. Was exactly my thought. So, we can put this on for a first read and then get the permission from the board. I guess I can ask on Tuesday.
Is that okay?
A first read on Tuesday? No, you don't mean that.
in terms of,
Budget vote. Okay, we could. That's
Well, the
You don't
next
have to
meeting
be
is
there.
after
I'm
our
saying the-
classes
the
are over.
boards.
Yeah, it really needs to be Tuesday,
Okay,
unless we call an
so
Because
would you like
the
us,
next meeting is until the last week.
understood,
It
so.
could be this portion of it, it doesn't
Right,
have to be the
that's-
whole, but just to get the board's permission for you to go, for the board to say as a whole, yeah, looks great.
Right, we're treating this as a section of our code of character, culture, conduct. So we have this, we have the other ones, we can get the edits we've discussed to you today
That would be great.
for Tuesday read,
Or it could just be this portion.
that portion.
'cause this
Right,
is
not
the
the whole
portion-
code, right, just
Right,
this
this is the
portion,
portion, even the dress code philosophy doesn't have
just
to
that
be.
portion.
It's this, because of the pressing deadline of this portion and what you would like to put into motion, Dr. Bear, I would say just the minor things,
Okay,
you know, just like, please refer
We
to the
can't
handbook
surprise our
for-
kids.
I'm sorry?
First day of school, we can't surprise our kids.
Agreed.
just on a logistics process. The individual schools' handbooks, we don't do anything to.
No.
So technically, whatever you do as of today to your handbook does not need to be board approved.
Correct.
So a lot of
But it
this,
does need to comply with our.
It should be in alignment with
Policy.
policy, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
yes, so technically there's current living document that says
Yeah.
that the cell phones are open at certain times, so
Yeah.
it does have to go on.
So the schools
For
will adjust
first
their
read and
handbooks
whatnot.
for September, based, and we will have already approved the policy by then.
Yeah.
And even when we did modify this, when, this was approved, I believe, at the September meeting,
Yeah.
the whole code.
correct.
So we had, at the high school, the assistant principals went into each social studies class to talk about what the big changes were so that the students were made aware, because we do need to review this with our students every year. And we do that on the first day of school, but with the change coming, we wanted to go back and make sure. So this would be not giving every single detail necessarily, but giving that general overview to our students and families of a significant change that's coming so that they are prepared, they can grieve the loss of their cell phones during the school day, and, you know, we can make
Live it up this
concrete,
month.
the concrete plans for the next year.
I mean, I'm thinking now, this is law, so you have to do this whether this committee and this board says we like this language or not. If you wanted to be on the safe side, as the chairperson, I can just ask at the meeting on Tuesday night, you know, this is what the schools would like to do going forward. But you actually have to comply with the law whether we like this language or not. So I don't even know that we need to ask the boards, I don't even know if you need my approval. I mean, our approval, not
So we're-
mine, but ours.
Yeah, so we're gonna be,
Because I think.
we're gonna be online, you know, on target to have the policy approved by the August 1st expectation, which is in the law. So I think what we're looking for is permission for Dr. Bear to start the conversation with the kids, so there's time for them to adapt. So I think if, you know.
I think you don't need the board's approval for that.
Right, so I can just put a communication out to the board and let them know, this is where we're heading, let us know if you have any concerns.
And I can share any materials that would be used. I'm certainly not handing out a draft of this policy. It would really be the overview of this is what's coming.
Have our lawyers looked at this, just to make sure, because I know it tracks the language in the statute, because, you know, I've read the statute, but have our lawyers?
They have not
looked
yet, we can have them look at it, of course. But the language is really pulled from.
From the
from the law.
legislature, yeah, the legislation, yeah.
Just to check, is it on for first read on Tuesday? Will it be on for first read on Tuesday?
We can have the updates by the end of the day.
Timeline, first read, how many reads again? First read,
Second read.
second read, adopt, that's
First
like,
read and then adoption.
So
I think that
it doesn't have to.
it doesn't have to be, because I think now that, I was thinking just to pull this section so that Dr. Barrett could proceed with her process, but I think it's better to have present the code of conduct as a whole, if we don't have to segregate
Right.
this one thing.
Because we have a June meeting, we have a July meeting, that can be our first read, it can be our adoption, and we're ready to go.
Right.
And it gives time for the approval process.
Right.
But I will communicate to the board on the steps that Dr. Bear is gonna take in preparing the students over the next month.
Sometimes I think out loud and I change my mind and within, but I think it's valuable for you to be able to do the work you need to do as soon as possible. And the text of this is not going to change meaningfully. It's taken directly from law,
Can I just ask one thing?
unless the legislature changes.
Is there any reason for Tuesday's meeting, because we have a meeting coming up, and it's really this potential one that would hold anything up with delays of whatnot that needs to be done by August 1st? None of the other edits actually need to be done by August 1st. So in new business or committee update, could we not just get a sense of the board if anyone will be asking for edits?
Sure.
Just on this one page
This
that
whole
they can
piece?
read, yeah, just, because what if one of them does literally have something very significant that they want to bring up, which affects any dialogue that you'll be giving to students? I just feel like as an opportunity for the full board, it just be a question presented to the full board of,
Just
is
this
there,
piece.
just that piece, is there something that you are gonna ask for first read? It could be in packet today, like, just as a footnote today, or an email out today, make sure to read it before Tuesday, and if there is something that you're gonna bring up, then Dr. Bear knows, wait, please do not talk to the school community yet, because it does need to be discussed more.
But I think the law is the law, like, right?
100%.
You can't change.
Field trips is not part of the law, will a trustee bring that up, right? So the location of them is not part of the law, will a trustee bring them up? Those are things that like
Local decisions.
should be clear in your own mind before we muddle anything with any kind of discussions, but there are some things that I feel like you may bring up that are not actually part of the law, that were things that you explained to us but didn't explain to the full board yet.
Okay, I would like to have, before it goes, I would like to have a council look at this to make sure it's okay. Before Tuesday and let them have that deadline. Cause we had that deadline, otherwise, just with the minor modifications where we say like wherever it's at C school handbook or, but other than that, I don't see anything material to add. Okay, and then we'll put it on for a first read on Tuesday.
Or just a note, not like an official first read, just something so we know that are you gonna have something that is gonna prevent this as an actual first read on June?
It can be an official first read and then be revised
Yeah,
before it gets adopted.
First read with or without the edits, the minor edits that we've
With edits.
discussed?
With- if you-
Just
yeah,
checking, just checking.
If
Okay.
you can, yeah,
Yes, I said we would.
yes, thank you. Okay, thank you for staying.
thank you, thank you. I'll email questions.
Okay, great,
So we're all set, right?
yes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you both very much.
This is on.
I think those are mine.
Okay, equivalence in instructional staff, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a required policy. This is basically what you have in front of you is NISBA's version. Our attorneys have looked at it. This is the language they have approved.
Go line up with the packets.
Any comments, questions? Because otherwise we can put this up for a first read. It doesn't have, thank you very much. It doesn't have to be on Tuesday, but if you want it on Tuesday, that's great. Whatever, however quickly you can get it on.
Okay.
Next one, promotion and retention of students. Okay. Ms. Melconian, I know you had a lot of questions about this policy, and so we brought it back. And I see there were several revisions that were done by staff. So Dr. Shields, I think you and Dr. Feeney edited the first sentence of the second paragraph, because I had asked, do we have district curriculum guides? And so you revised it to say the New York State Learning Standards define learning outcomes, so we're guided by that.
Correct.
Under early identification intervention, Dr. Feeney, instead of using the word failing, because we didn't like that word, changed it to not meeting grade level expectation, which should then also be the definition or the phraseology in the second sentence, instead of the word failing. To say a special support system will be designed for each student identified as being at risk of not meeting grade level expectation or expectations. Well, our attorney added a new section, retention notification to parents, guardians. She just took out a sentence about notice from the previous version and added it into this new purple version, and so that we provided appropriate notice. So those are the edits that were done by staff. And then, Ms. Marconi, it's your questions.
So on page 2, under elementary schools, at the elementary level, students who pass all subjects. So should we be changing that as well to students who meet the,
Grade level expectations.
yes.
Yeah, sure. So meet grade level expectations in all subjects.
Or meet the New York State learning standards, but, however we want to,
I think the grade level expectation.
okay.
Now, middle school, you have the word fail.
Same again, yeah. So students who do not meet,
Is that okay with, does that, as an educator, is that okay with you, Dr. Shields? Instead of saying fail in middle school, who do not meet, do we fail
So an F is a grade in middle school. At the elementary level, it's much more appropriate to use the language that we were just discussing.
okay.
So how about,
In the middle school, they do get grades that would note a failure.
so can we say students who receive a failing grade?
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Mhm.
So middle school students who receive a failing grade in a subject, or in any subject, okay, have the failure evaluated. Okay. And I guess in high school, the way you get the credits is by not failing, so it's kind of a tautological thing about
Mhm.
getting the credits.
Mhm. Okay. I think that's one of the only questions I had.
Okay. And this can go on for a first read. With the changes and the caveat, when we unlock the documents, I'll make those changes. Okay. That, so student harassment and bullying. So just doing my packet. Sorry about that. Okay, so we gave this to our attorneys to review and to synthesize with the regulation, because there was a ton of repetition between the policy and the regulation. And so, I think that the attorney did a good job of tightening up the policy. I just wanted to point out a couple of things on the policy. I had one note, I have to find where it was. Okay, so on page 6 of the policy. So really, Dr. Shields, I have this question, this first question is for you, the training. So our attorney said that DASSA requires schools to provide DASSA training to all employees. Under training, we have in the second sentence, the superintendent, district-wide DAC, and the district's professional development committee will incorporate training to support this program in new teacher orientation. And then training opportunities will be provided for all staff who have contact with students. Does this language meet the DASSA requirement that all trainees, training must be provided to all employees?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure.
Mhm.
Okay. Then for us as a committee, we're now two, under dissemination and monitoring, actually the last paragraph on the page. So we know the code of character, culture, and conduct must be reviewed annually. This policy that we're on right now, actually my stomach's growling, the harassment policy is not required to be reviewed annually by law. As I check with the attorneys. But in this last paragraph, it says each year, as part of the annual review of the code of conduct character, this policy will be reviewed to assess its effectiveness and compliance with state and federal law. So the question I have to you is, what is your feeling as to whether we want to include this paragraph? Do we also want to review the harassment policy on an annual basis?
So I think what it's saying is that if you notice a pattern of harassment, for example, in your student outcomes, related to the code of character, culture, and conduct, that you may wish to revisit this policy. I don't know if it needs to be here in the policy. I think that would be a natural step we would take if we saw that there was some sort of nexus and an issue that we need to address.
Yeah, so that's my question, and that's actually a question that Ms. Alvarez has in another policy, that if there's something going on at the student level, is it really the issue with the policy, or is it the issue either in the building or with individual students? And just changing the policy, change what's happening in the buildings.
I think we establish good policy, and then we work within that policy to deliver it for our district and our kids.
So do we delete this paragraph?
I think regardless, the way this is written makes no sense.
It makes no, right, it makes no sense.
So we either remove it or fix it, because as it's written, it does not apply to the reality of the world.
Right, that's the point. So obviously, is there some type of, under DASSA, isn't there some type of annual review and annual reporting that the district has?
We do have to do annual reporting.
Right, so that in and of itself should trigger a review,
Sure,
not this policy.
right. So you could eliminate that bottom paragraph on page 6 is what you're suggesting.
I'm
Or
asking-
we just simply say something to the effect of, you know, with data analysis, or you're the wordsmith here, but applying an analysis of the data would prompt a review of this policy if there were issues with how it was being implemented or applied or whatever. Or we just take it out.
See, the thing is, I guess it's a chicken egg thing, because in a practical sense, if we have a really good policy, but things are still happening
Right, that's in the
with DASSA,
regulation.
right? It's not that our policy is bad, it's that
Right.
people are humans, and some are better intentioned than others, let's just say. And so it really not the policy that's the issue. That was my concern, that
It's the implementation.
if we have, because this to me is a very comprehensive, very full policy along with the regulations. And so my concern is forcing another annual review, where an annual review really is not the issue, that changing the policy is not the issue.
Right.
So that's kind of why I'm saying, I don't know if that needs to be in the policy, or maybe each year, the district is responsible for complying with DASSA, because that's where the law requires you to analyze your data and submit the data. So I don't even know, does that go in here? You want me to ask, I can ask the attorney for language?
Well, I guess the point is they're using the term monitoring.
Where is the term? Where am I?
The title.
It's in the
title of
subheading.
section.
Oh, and monitoring. Huh. So we can take out monitoring, or I can have a conversation with the attorney as to, because the attorney said this is not in the law. This annual review is not in the law.
It's just in the
Of the
NISBA
policy,
sample.
of the policy, it's in the
Right, it's in the
NISBA sample.
NISBA
And she said,
sample.
I don't even know why it's there.
So then maybe we're just complicating matters by it being there.
If you'd like to take it out, I don't see any reason why you can't.
Okay. Take it out. I'm redlining it and taking it out. And changing, it, just have it be dissemination. Because somewhere in there, I think, someplace, I remember reading about the requirement of reporting the DASSA at the state level. Oh, here, incident reporting and investigation. Yeah, I think all of that, the incident reporting investigation, the board will receive the annual school safety climate data report, all of that, and the state required report. I think all of that language throughout, I think now it makes this paragraph redundant and meaningless, yes. It's not about the policy, it's about the data, and we've already talked about the data earlier in the policy. Okay. And on the regulation, I leave that to the administrators to see, make sure that, all this redlining you see was done by the, attorney.
So I have a question, just because we always talk about regulation not being our lane, right?
Right.
So in regulation, the very first sentence is the board condemns.
Yes.
So
And
why
that's
are we being
NISBA
mentioned?
language, and that's NISBA language.
Right, but why are we being mentioned in regulation if we're not a part of regulation?
That's a really good point, and so I will take this back to the attorney and say, because actually the board is discussed throughout. The Board of Education will only designate a staff member, so forth and so on. So I am going to take this back to the attorney and say, the regulation needs to be what the administrators are responsible for doing,
Right.
and not the board. And if there's anything in the regulation that is putting a responsibility on the board, please make sure you have synthesized it appropriately into the
Right.
policy.
It should be something to the effect of according to policy or something like that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think council has more homework to do. So is that okay that we give it back to council?
Yep. But it sounds like if you'd like to move forward on the policy, you have completed that review. Unless you think some of
However-
it hinges on the regulation.
Yes, Ms. Melconian is correct, that there's language in the regulation that says, for example, I think in the regulation on the fourth page, it says the Board of Education, under the role of the Dignity Act Coordinator, the Board of Education will annually designate a staff member who has been thoroughly trained, blah, 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 blah. Somewhere that's in the policy, but I don't know if because I remember we talked about, yeah, in the policy on page
Yes.
4, in order to, at the top, in order to implement this program, the board will designate its annual organizational meeting, right? So we just wanna make sure that if there's language in the regulation that's actually better than the language that's already in the policy, that language be moved to the policy. Yeah, and unfortunately, the regulation and the policy, as NISBA has given to us, are very unwieldy. And, I think we need to give council more time. Okay, homeless children, oh, we're at level 3, oh my heavens. Okay. So this also came through NISBA. I don't know if there's a regulation for this one.
Do you want us to stop? There's no way we're getting through this agenda.
We're going to have to pause. Do you have any concerns about, except for the policy number, we have to go back to 5151, because that's the NISBA number. Did you have any concerns with this policy?
I was just confused by the numbering, so,
It's going to be 5151, which is the NISBA number.
but then there was a 5153 that was in this
Because
pile.
5153 is our old number. That's our Port
Okay.
Washington number. NISBA has it numbered as 5151.
And it has different titles, so I was just trying to understand how this all related.
Right,
Okay.
right, so, the only other thing was, so what you were looking at, the 5153 is the old Port Washington number. Anything that says Port Washington at the top, well, that's not true, because now it says it here, but this is the NISBA, the thing with the shaded, anytime you see all the shaded, that's really NISBA.
Yes, so which one are we actually considering?
The shaded one. And it can say Port Washington at the top, it's the same language.
Okay, so it's this one.
But I would look at the one that's redlined, which is the one that says Port Washington homeless children 5153.
This one.
Yes, which will
Okay.
have to be 5151.
Okay. So did I have anything in this one?
And the only thing
no,
I
I
had, okay, sorry. The only thing I had done was on the second page, it says a homeless child or youth has the right to attend a school of their origin. That I asked council to revise that paragraph because it didn't make sense to me. And it said, or any school that permanently house students who live in the attendance area in which the homeless students actually living are eligible. I said, I don't even know what that means. And so she just made it very simple, or their school of location.
Yep.
And other than that, this is
Okay.
NISBA's recommendation, council has reviewed that, council has reviewed the regulation, is my understanding. And I'd say that this can go on for a first read, and I say that because I really wanted to get to, the extreme heat. I guess we'll have to put family engagement. We'll have to, sorry, getting ahead of myself. Family engagement, I think maybe that is going to require more time. That was the Title I policy, so we'll have to table that until next time.
Okay.
The extreme heat one, for which we also have a deadline, is before us again, and I was going to ask you, Dr. Shields, to ask us why. Are we now ready to move forward with the,
The attorney said that we should move forward,
okay,
and if for some reason something changes, she would let us know what to edit.
do we know, or do you know, that because I printed out what I thought was the latest version of the text of the legislation. Is the where practicable language still,
I
Do you
didn't
know?
see that.
so that is going to be where practicable in our policy. talks about taking the students out of the room.
So bottom of page 2, last paragraph.
Yes, first sentence, last paragraph. On page 2,
Oh, got it.
when practicable, which the legislature has basically acknowledged that sometimes a school or a teacher or an administrator might not be able to move instruction someplace else.
True.
And so that's where this comes in. And so I just didn't, I just wanted to make sure that that language, the where practicable language, was added to the draft legislation, and I just didn't know if in the final version it was still in there. So if,
The guidance we're getting is that it should remain.
should remain, okay, so then we move forward with the first read. Okay. And the policy, we've added all of the optional paragraphs that NISBA said we could add. And the policy really tracks the language of the statute, because we don't have anything else to go on. So if the attorney says to move forward, I guess we'll move forward. Okay, first read. Great. So with that, I guess we'll come to a place where we can take community comments. You okay with that? We don't have, oh, yes, we do, we still have one community member. No comments. Okay, well then, we will adjourn at 11:33. Thank you very much. Oh, our next meeting, sorry, our next meeting is at 9 o'clock in the morning. Our next meeting is on June 13th, indeed, at 9 a.m. I think, I'm not sure, this might be the last committee meeting before the election on Tuesday. If you are listening, please remember Weber Middle School All-Purpose Room from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. There's a below the tax cap adopted budget up for vote, and the board trustee election, 2 empty seats coming up. Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you, we're adjourned.